Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Good deal. Thank you. Hi, my name is Ted Bishop, and I'm an alcoholic. And it has been by the grace of God and with the help of the people in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since August 19th, 1974, and I'm very grateful to be here tonight. And I brought you a Bible verse. People usually get amused by this. I haven't got any jokes, so the title of this is Judge Not. These are Bible verses, so I got to read it. It says, the preacher knocked on the door of a church member but received no response. He was annoyed because he could hear footsteps and knew the mother of the family was there. The pastor left his calling card writing on the back of it, Revelation 3:20, Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him. The next Sunday, as the parishioners filed out of the service, a woman who had refused to answer the door greeted the pastor and handed him her card with Genesis 3:10 written on it. Later, the pastor looked up the passage and found the following. I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. I needed that. Thank you. Very glad to have my wife with me tonight, Margaret, seated right here. And well blessed. We celebrated 33 years of marriage last Friday a week ago. And very glad to have her with me tonight. And very glad to be here and appreciate you having me here. I had a lot of trouble admitting that I was an alcoholic and that I was powerless over alcohol. And I thought about it, and I guess really there's four reasons why people will not admit that they're powerless over alcohol: youth, health, wealth, and brains. And I had all four of them when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 47 when I got to AA, and really I thought that I was too young to be an alcoholic. I hear all these young people say they thought they were too young, but youth, we're never going to die when we're young. We're the daredevils. We fight the battles, and it's hard to admit that you're powerless over alcohol when you have youth on your side. I was also healthy, and when you're healthy, why should you do anything to change if you're in good health? And I was in good health. I never went to a hospital. Well, I went there one time, but that was a mistake. I passed out in a courtroom, and although I wasn't wealthy, I wasn't hurting for money. I had a home, and I had a family, and I had 2 cars in the garage, and society tells us that if we have the wealth that we are successful people, and therefore why should I do anything to change? And also I thought that I was a pretty brainy person when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was quite sure that I could figure this thing out myself, that I would not need your help in order to solve my little problems with alcohol. And when I got to AA, I was so clever that I could see right through this song and dance that you people had, and I could handle it myself. I didn't, but I thought that with my brains I would be able to. When I was about 6 months in AA, I went to a conference in San Antonio, and the reason I went was they had a psychiatrist talking there, and I thought that a psychiatrist would be helpful to a judge like myself. And I went there, and this fellow was talking about something. I really didn't know what he was talking about, but he had a little unit that he used to say, if you can smile when things go wrong and say it doesn't matter, if you can laugh off cares and woes and trouble makes you fatter, if you can keep a cheerful face when all around are blue, you better have your head examined, bud. There's something wrong with you. And I had taken all my feelings and I had pressed them down inside of me, and I honestly did not know what in the world this man was talking about. I had no idea, and I had no idea for a long time when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, when people were talking about living problems. I didn't have any living problems when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a judge of two small towns there in Texas, halfway between Houston and Galveston, Texas City and La Marque, Twin Cities. And I used to go over to the Holiday Inn at 11 o'clock every morning at the Caravan Club, and I opened them up. I was the first one there. And I would drink vodka martinis on the rocks. And I would sit there and I would drink those things until I couldn't stand up. And then I'd go over and I'd sit down and I'd start holding court. And they would bring people before me, many of them just like you. And I would wonder why in the world you people couldn't control your drinking like I was doing. And I was sitting there drunk. And they would bring cases for me, and I couldn't hear half of what went on. And when the cases got through, I knew they were through because the lawyers had sit down. And I'd mumble something, and the lawyers would say, "What'd that judge say?" And I had a clerk there who had been covering for me for years, and she says, "The judge says you're guilty, and the fine is $52.50 paid out here," and we'd move on to the next case. And in this job, I was supposed to marry people when they came to get married, but I had a problem there because a lot of times I'd be drunk and I couldn't marry them. But I solved that problem. I was also with a real estate man there, and I taught him the marriage ceremony. So if people come to me to get married and I was drunk, he'd perform the ceremony. We have a lot of sinners running around Texas City and La Marque this very day. And I was a cute drunk. I specialized in cuteness. People come to me to get married, and I was able to perform the ceremony. Well, I'd give them a ceremony, and I'd say, "Well, now, I hope this marriage was made in heaven and it's going to last forever. At the same time, I'm a little older and I'm a little wiser than you, and in case this thing don't work out, here's my attorney-at-law card." And I created confusion wherever I went. I'd be sitting there in court, and people would walk in, they say, "You're not the judge," because they'd been married by the real estate man. And you'd drink, too, if you had to listen to things that I had to listen to when I was a judge. We had a murder case there they were trying one time, and the prosecutor asked the witness, said, "In what part of the anatomy was the deceased shot?" And she said, "Judge, do I have to answer that?" And I said, "Well, you sure do, young lady." She said, "Judge, you won't believe this, but he was shot right in the subpoena." And said when the police got there, he was D.O.D. They said, "What is that D.O.D.?" She says, "Dead on the driveway." And the first case that was ever filed in my court, a man and a wife had separated. The husband left. The wife had a boyfriend move in. The husband decided to forgive his wife, and he walked in, and there was his wife and the boyfriend in bed. And the boyfriend came down to file disturbing the peace charges. I'm telling you, truth is stranger than fiction. This was the first case I had when I was a judge. And I was also the coroner of Texas City and La Marque. I used to go out and pronounce people dead. And I went out to this house one time, and I pronounced this guy dead, and they moved him into the bedroom. and I passed out in the living room. Yeah, I woke up in the ambulance dead. They left the fifth. They said he looked better than I did. And about 2 years before I got to AA, I decided my hair was getting a little bit thin up here on top, and I didn't want the ladies to lose their interest in me. So I decided I was going to get a hair transplant. And I went to a little place there in Pasadena, and this doctor said, I can give you some hair transplants up here on the top of the head and kind of fill in some of those sparse places, and give you 20 plugs for $5 a plug. That's $100. You'll have a full head of hair. My God, I thought that was a wonderful idea. He'd get luxurious hair for $100. And so I said, okay. And what they do, they take these little round nippers, these cutters, and they cut circles of hair out of the back of your neck. And then they dig little round holes up here on the top of your head, and they take these plugs and they plant them in these holes all around like that. And I stand before you here tonight with 20 plugs right here on the top of my head tonight. And you see, I have this fear that someday all my hair is going to fall out, and these plugs are just going to be standing up there. You know, that worries me. That was some time ago. I understand that they can get these hair transplants from any part of the body now. But I want everyone here to know that mine came from the back of my neck. And after I had this thing, boy, that was a bloody mess. They give you general anesthetic, and they wrapped my head up, and the blood was coming down these old coveralls I had on. It looked like a mummy. And I ran home, and my wife said, you're going to have to go up and get our boy out of jail. He's up there for possession of drugs again. So I went up to the port, and I said, my name is Ted Bishop, and I'm the judge of Texas City and La Marque, and I'm here to get my boy out of jail. Blood coming down, and cop says, the hell you are. You know, they were going to put me in jail. But I don't remember much of what I did when I was drinking, because I was drinking. And I don't remember much of what I did when I wasn't drinking, because I wasn't drinking. Yeah. I remember the resentments most of all. I didn't know that's what they were, but for the life of me, I could not figure out why I could not have all the money that I wanted, all the approval that I wanted, all the sex that I wanted, and all the power that I wanted. Why in the world would a world be put together where you couldn't have everything you wanted? That wasn't right. And it wasn't right that it wasn't right. I tried to straighten everybody out so I could get what I wanted the way I wanted it. But they wouldn't listen. They retaliated and they put me down. I resented that. Everywhere I went, people left. I said, there they go. I must pursue them. For I am their leader. I said, to hell with it. I'll resign from the human race. Really, I quite effectively isolated myself from God and from my fellow man years and years ago. Really, actually, before I ever got heavily involved in alcohol. When I got to AA, I did not know when my wife and I were married. I did not know how old my wife was. I didn't know how old my children were. I didn't know what grade they were in school. I couldn't give you the name of 2 clients that I had in over 25 years of practicing law. I was just completely out of it. My complaint really was always the same. Is this all there is? And, if I could have been anywhere near honest, it would have been, is this all there is for me? I never could seem to find what I didn't know I was looking for. And I figured that I was in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Two character defects have kind of plagued me, perfectionism and procrastination. There's no use doing anything today because today things just aren't right. But someday when everything gets just right, that is just the way I want them, just the way they're supposed to be, why then I'll do something. But on a daily basis, I simply could not and I would not get involved in life. I did the least I could that would just barely get me by. And that always left me with a lot of potential. My God, did I ever have the potential. But someday things were going to be different. I was going to figure all this out. I was going to be a success. I'd be on top. And people would be sorry that they hadn't seen this vast potential that lay beating fiercely just beneath my timid breast. And though they mistreat me now, well, one day, someday, I would forgive them. One and all, someday. But someday always seemed like such a long way off, and I was a very impatient kind of fellow, and I'd take a drink. And just like that, it was someday. I was in charge, and I was in control, and for the only time in my life, I was comfortable. I didn't have any principles to live by. I didn't have any rules. I tried to borrow yours by doing things that I thought would please you. One of the first times I tried, I said, if I call attention to myself and people like me, then they won't hurt me, and I'll feel better. But I got tired of trying to please all you dummies. But I kept on doing it anyway. I tried church as a way of life. I belonged to the church, the First Baptist Church. They call me Brother Ted. And I was dipped and I was dunked. But it didn't work. All I could see was some fellow be standing up behind a podium just like this, and he'd be saying, friends, there's coming a day. It's going to be here soon. It's going to be here when you least expect it. It's going to be a final day. It's going to be a judgment day. And they're going to haul your butt up in front of this wide screen, and they're going to flash back on every rotten, lousy, miserable, filthy, despicable thing you ever did in all your life. I didn't feel too good. I got the idea in church that you had to feel bad in order to be good. I could just see all the dummy sinners sitting around there. They're watching old Ted up on the screen. They don't know their turn's coming up next. And they're all sitting around saying, shame, shame, shame. This preacher asked me, he says, Ted, he says, how come you keep going to AA all these years after you've been sober all these number of years? I said, well, preacher, I guess for the same reason your flock keeps coming back to church every Sunday after you've saved all them. I tried doing just what I wanted to do. I tried doing just what I felt like doing as a way of life. But, if you've taken your feelings and you've repressed those things and you try to live on those, you're going to just be crazy as hell. And I was nutty as a dodo bird when I got the Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd be sitting there in my chair and the knives and the furniture would be whizzing by my head. And I would look at this crazy, demented thing, knowing that it was driving her crazy because I would not react to what she was doing. I just looked at her. She said I smirked at her. I tried success as a way of life. Now that'll work. I was a judge, I was a lawyer, had a home, had a family, I had a charge account at every liquor store in Texas City and La Marque and one in Galveston. That's success. But the thing that I was looking for really wasn't there either. And really, I guess the best way you could describe my life before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous would be to say, I almost made it. Everything I ever did, I almost. Alcohol wasn't almost. When I drank it, I was happy, I was joyous, and I was free. But man, without it, I was a nothing. I was a dope, I was a sap, I was a wimp. But with alcohol, I was magnificent. I was witty, I was charming, and I was suave. I've spent a lifetime aching for suavity. And I drank till I just could not drink anymore. I mean, I could not drink anymore. But I kept on drinking anyway. And I kept on trying to find some way to control my drinking or stop my drinking. And being a smart aleck college graduate, I started reading books. And as a result of reading these books, I started jogging. Tom and I must have read the same books. And I had these little red shorts, and I'd run around the block. I knew those Venetian blinds would be shaking because I knew those housewives would be watching me when And I tried yoga, and I tried transcendental meditation, but all I could meditate on was why the jogging and the yoga wouldn't work for me. I tried psychiatry. I went back in my youth, found out I hated my father and my mother. Well, I hated just about everybody, really. I wasn't okay, and by God, none of you were either. I've had a troubled childhood. It's been a long one. And I tried psychology. You know, I've heard these guys at AA meetings. You need to break the behavior pattern. And you just stay away from the places where you drink and the people that you drink with. This will break the behavior pattern, and you'll be all right. And I tried that, and I stayed away from the people, and I stayed away from the places, and it worked for a while. But everything I did worked for a while because I was a periodic drunk. And then one day I woke up, and I hadn't been around any of those places, and I hadn't been around any of those people, but I didn't care. I just went ahead and drank anyway. It didn't make any difference to me. I read 2 books by a doctor at the Veterans Hospital in Houston. He said I had a bad hypothalamus. This is a gland up here in the center of the brain. And he says when you get ready to drink, this thing just starts titillating, just goes berserk up there. And this is what causes you to drink. And he intimated if I would have a brain operation and have my hypothalamus removed, that I'd be able to drink like everybody else. And I was thinking I might need a brain operation about this time. But I got to reading on about the hypothalamus, and I found out it also controlled appetite and sex. And at that time, I was not willing to go to any lengths to get sober. Dr. Tintera said I had bad adrenal glands. And he says if I'd take some adrenal cortex extract, this would fix up my adrenals, and I'd be able to drink like everybody else. I went to the doctor, and he gave me a large shot in the rear end. And the only effect it had on my drinking was that I had to stand up when I drank. That's all, because I kept on drinking. I've taken glutamine and tryptophan as recommended by a chemistry professor who wrote 3 books on the subject at the University of Texas. And I used to take handfuls of these pills and down them with alcohol because there were so many pills to take. I read somewhere that you could drink an ounce of alcohol an hour, night and day for the rest of your life, and this will never harm you. And I said, boy, this is what I've been looking for. I'll just drink an ounce an hour for the rest of my life, get to that right point, and stay there forever. Went to the bar, ordered a drink, finished it in 15 minutes. 45 minutes to go till the next drink. I said, well, what I'll do, I'll have the next hour's drink now. When the next hour gets here, I won't have that drink. And I got drunk. I've tried health foods, I've tried diets, I've tried really everything that I've heard any drunk in or out of Alcoholics Anonymous has ever tried, and none of it worked for me. But I thought these things were working. I was a periodic alcoholic, and I would go periods of time without drinking. And I've always had these fantasies, these delusions of grandeur, and I thought I could help people with alcohol problems, and I could just envision myself up on a high mountain somewhere. and there would be drunks coming down this mountain, or people of all kinds up this next mountain and over this next mountain and over the rise. Just a veritable sea of humanity laid out before me. And I would be at the top of this mountain, and I would arise, and I would be dressed in these white robes, and they would be gently shifting in the breezes, and this great circular shaft of light would be descending from the heavens and playing on my tassel locks, and this strange, eerie, haunting melody would be playing from afar, and yet so near, it seemed like it was Rock of Ages. And I would arise very majestically, and I would address them. Tired and weary, desperate and hopeless, want a new and better way of life, oh, come unto me. All ye who labor and are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. For thine yoke is heavy, while its mine is light. Yea, and verily I say unto thee, go, my children, and drink no more. I had a lot of brain damage when I got that across the line. Every time I stopped drinking, I always left a reservation. I said, now this is absolutely, positively, without a doubt, the last time, King Jackson Chickarock, the last time I'm going to take a drink. Unless maybe something comes up real bad later on that just makes it absolutely necessary. I tried AA without trying AA. I was out campaigning for judge there, and I ran into an old-time AA member. His name was Sam Harkins. He was my first sponsor. He died in 1979. And he says, well, Ted, this guy was always, for some reason, asking me to go to an AA meeting. Every time I see him, he'd say, Ted, would you like to go to an AA meeting? That's all he ever said. I said, no, I wouldn't like to go to an AA meeting. But he had a different approach this time. He says, I'm glad to see that you're running for office. He says, we've got a bunch of alcoholics over here meeting at a conference in Texas City, about 500 of them. He says, why don't you go over there, pass out your cards, and get the votes of all these people? Well, my God, I didn't think these kind of people voted, but I wasn't willing to pass up any opportunity, so I went over there and started passing out my cards, said, my name is Ted Bishop. Vote for me on election day. You people are doing fine work here. Keep up the fine work. Society needs this. And I had a special campaign slogan for the ladies. I'd say, ladies, before you go to bed, think of Ted. I lost that election. I had been drinking with a millionaire there in Texas City. He was the wealthiest man in Texas City. And I was trying to get his law business. My law business wasn't doing too good right at that particular time, for some reason. And I was trying to get this man's business. And now you talk about a bad drunk. This guy was a bad drunk. He drank a lot worse than I did. Everybody that I drank with drank worse than I did. And he was really having a lot of problems with alcohol. And Sam, when I went to this conference, Sam had invited me to a meeting of the 518 group in Texas City, which is the AA club there. And I had been to this conference, and there had been something there, Really, I would have liked to have gone back, but it would have been my ruination, my God, be an alcoholic, how terrible, it would ruin me. So I went down to this 518 group, and I told Sam, I said, now, Sam, I want you to understand why I've come tonight. I said, I've got this very wealthy, influential businessman. He's a bad drunk, and he was too ashamed to come down here. Do you have any literature that I might take to him? And Sam gave me a big book, and I took it home and I read it, and it looked a little bit churchy to me. So I took it over and I sold it to the millionaire's wife for $10. I bought 2/5 of Canadian Club with the $10. I had to put the money in the plate later on. The wife said the book was well worth it. But it wasn't too long after that this millionaire came to see me. He wanted me to straighten out his life. And I saw a chance for me to get to Alcoholics Anonymous without being an alcoholic. no one would know. And so I told Billy, this millionaire, I said, what you need to do is, Billy, is to go down here to this Alcoholics Anonymous bunch. I said, I've been to a couple of meetings, and they're not really that bad. I've been over there to help them out a couple of times, and what you can do is go down there, and I said, in order to break the ice, I'll go with you. And so that's the way I got started going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And my wife, Margaret, she took Billy's wife to Al-Anon that first night. So we both started AA and Al-Anon at the same time. But of course, when I started AA, I was not an alcoholic. I was just somebody going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, really the best thing that the people in Alcoholics Anonymous ever did for me is just leave me alone and let me go to AA. And, you know, people say they didn't like AA when they went to AA. Man, I just loved AA. You know, if you're not really an alcoholic, you can go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and you can walk around there and you can just be superior as hell to everybody in there, you know. And I just love to go to those things. And I'd go to these meetings, and I made more meetings than Billy did. I was trying to find out how to stay sober so I could stay sober. And then also the millionaire's wife told me she'd give me half of everything they owned if I got Billy sober. So I was trying to find out how to get him sober. And so I was making a lot of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And sometimes they'd call on me to talk. And what I'd do, I'd explain alcoholism to them. You know, I read a lot of books, and I could see that you people didn't understand it very well, so I'd explain it to you. You know, first stage, second stage, third stage, primary, secondary, everything that didn't have a thing in the world to do with recovery, well, that's what I was telling them. And, you know, newcomers, they thought I made great talk. They used to line up, and they'd shake my hand. Oh, it was great, you know. And old-timers, they sit back in the back of the room. They never said a word to me. You know, I figured they were probably jealous because I had gotten it all together so quickly and was putting it across so much better than all of them could. And sometimes they'd call me a talk, and I'd say, my name's Ted Bishop, and I'm a judge, and I'm a lawyer, and my law office is right down the street here, just about 3 blocks. And my law hours are 9 to 5. And I want you to know that I appreciate having an organization like this where a judge like myself can send people like you who need this kind of help. God bless you, and I'd sit down. I've been coming to AA about 4 months, and I got one of these big cards in the mail, one of these great big things, and I opened that thing up, and it was this dog Snoopy in the Peanuts column. And Snoopy had Woodstock and all the little birds lined up there in front of him, and Snoopy was up on this pedestal in his aviator outfit, and he was really laying on these birds. I mean, we really had a message. And the caption on this thing said, if you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, baffle them with your bullshit. Unsigned. And the people started looking funny at me at these meetings. And I knew what it was. Billy seemed like he was doing all right. Yet here I was still coming to AA. Why? So I figured I need a little bit more cover. So what I did, I started sentencing people to Alcoholics, and I've been elected by this time, and I started sentencing people to Alcoholics Anonymous from my courtroom. They'd come to me for DWI, driving while intoxicated, and they had the opportunity of going to Alcoholics Anonymous or having me remove their license. Everybody went to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started sentencing people there from my courtroom, and then I would go down to the AA meetings, and I would walk around the halls of 518, and I had a little black book that I carried with me, and I would walk up in the aisle, down the aisles of this club, and I would check off the names of the people that I had sent to AA, and I'd say, are you here? Are you here? You're going to have to make these meetings, or I'm going to have to issue a warrant for your arrest. I figured I was single-handedly building up the membership of a group that had been faltering badly until I arrived on the scene. And then I made a rare mistake. I went to a conference in 1974, Lone Star Roundup of 1974. And I didn't understand why I was going up there. I thought that Sam and C is Al-Anon, Sam's wife. I thought they were taking me up there so I could explain to these people how judges were sending people to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was going to be a speaker. And I went up there and nobody asked me anything. I mean, they just disregarded me completely, ignored me. And we were sitting around the room about the second day, and they were talking about this being a program of attraction rather than promotion. And I said, now wait a minute. What we need is a nationwide campaign of publicity. Put it in all the radios, TV, newspapers, let everybody know about about AA, and then all the judges all over the land will be sending people to Alcoholics Anonymous, and everybody will be in AA. There's a lot of people in the room, or I wouldn't have been sound at all. And C is this Al-Anon me. She said, well, Judge, she says, in front of all these bunch of people, she said, Judge, she says, just what in the world are you doing coming to Alcoholics Anonymous in the first place? Man, I didn't like that question. I said, well, I'm coming to see that Billy comes, and I'm coming to see that all these people that I sent to Alcoholics Anonymous come. She says, I think you're coming to Alcoholics Anonymous because you are attracted here to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the reason that you are attracted here, Judge, is because you are an alcoholic. My God, I just couldn't believe it. After all I'd done for them. And Sam, this pipe fitter, came over very quietly, and he said, Judge, he said, I guess you'll just have to go down and pick up a chip like all the rest of us did. Oh, it was very embarrassing. It was very humiliating. I went back to my room and I sweated some when I drank, but nothing like that night. Man, the sweat just poured off of me. And I'd sit there and lay there and I'd toss and I'd roll. 15 minutes I was an alcoholic. 15 minutes I wasn't. 15 minutes I was an alcoholic. 15 minutes I wasn't. But the thing that really tore me up was, I said, what if I go down there, pick up a chip, join Alcoholics Anonymous, and then 10 years later it turns out I'm not really an alcoholic, you know? That would be 10 years completely gone out of my life. But I didn't have anything to do. I wasn't drinking. What difference does it make what you do in Alcoholics Anonymous if you're not drinking? What difference does it make? I didn't have anything else to do. So come that Monday, I went down to a small group where I didn't think any of them would be, and I picked up a chip. And there I was, a genuine 100% member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was not impressed with your cornball signs. I was not enchanted with your great thoughts and your beautiful poetry. And I did not want to hear about God. I thought that you were the luckiest people in the world to have a wonderful fellow like me consent to join up with you. Absolutely convinced that you needed me, but that I did not need you. Well, I'll tell you the kind of attitude I had. Have you ever asked a lawyer, a doctor, a judge a question, just have them look at you like you weren't there? I used to sit on the bench like this, and I had these half glasses that I wore. They'd bring people before me charged with some crime. Maybe some of you have been before a judge sometime charged with some crime. You know what that means when a judge looks down on you like that? Yeah? That means you're a dumb bastard. And I am Mr. Wonderful. And that was my attitude when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And, of course, I took up all my time worrying about whether somebody was going to find out that I was in AA. God, it worried me night and day. They had a bunch of nurses there at a Friday night open meeting one time, and I sat there during that whole meeting praying that the chairman wouldn't call on me. And he didn't, and I saw those nurses' little a little time later, and they said, Judge, they said, what in the world were you doing down there at that meeting? I said, oh, I'm kind of a spiritual advisor down there. I said, they do good work. They do good work. But, after I had associated with the people in AA for a while, that began to wear off. And I was going around, I didn't know anything about anonymity, didn't care anything about anonymity. And I was going around and I was telling people that I was an Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went over to a police station there where I knew a sergeant, and I said, Sergeant, did you know that I've joined Alcoholics Anonymous? And he got up from where he was sitting, walked around the table to where I stood, and he said, Judge, I sure am glad to hear that. And I'd always been kind of a secret drinker. Everybody in Texas City, La Marque, and half of Galveston knew that I was a drunk. But I didn't want one single soul on the face of this earth to know that I was trying to change my life. And of course, I wanted to find out how this thing worked so I could tell you so I wouldn't have to do anything. And I used to go around, people just drive them crazy. Say, how does this thing work? How does this thing work? I was at a meeting one time and this speaker said, in order to stop drinking, it is first necessary that you stop drinking. I'd never heard that anywhere. It hadn't been in any of those books I read. I said, well, that's not right. In order to stop drinking, first of all, you've got to find out how not to drink. And after you find out how not to drink, then you cannot drink. But to just stop drinking without knowing how won't work. And while you're finding out how not to, you can keep on drinking while you're finding out how not to. And I went to this guy and I said, how does this thing work? How do you not get drunk? And he says, don't take the first drink and you won't get drunk. Well, this guy didn't have very much time. And I said, well, that may be all right for you. I said, but what have you got for us lawyers and judges? And he says, Ted, it's the same thing for everybody. You just don't take the first drink and you won't get drunk. Well, he didn't have very much time. I went over to somebody who had a lot of time in AA, and I said, how does this thing work? How do you not get drunk? And he says, don't take the first drink, and you won't get drunk. And I said, these guys really don't know how this thing works themselves. What I'll do, I'll go out and I'll find out how Alcoholics Anonymous works, and then I'll come back and I'll tell all them. They'll be glad to know. And so I took a leave of absence from Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got drunk. And I had to come crawling back to these same old goose. And I have been brought here tonight at considerable expense and no little inconvenience on my part to bring you this spiritual message, and that is this. Don't take the first drink and you won't get drunk. And as a corollary to that, it is necessary that you stop drinking before you find out how to stop drinking. It still doesn't make any sense to me. I got to watching you drunks, and I could see that you were alike in an amazing number of ways, that you had many similar characteristics. And I said, that's the way they stay sober. They're alike in so many ways. And so in order to help you out, I made a list of these things that I found. And I called it the BBB of AAA. That's the Bishop Big Book of the Association of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is in the form of questions. My questions, you don't have to answer. My questions, if you understand them, why, you may be one. Why is it that an alcoholic always thinks that he is the most unusual, the most important, and the most unique person in all the world? Why is it an alcoholic can't be shown anything? Old drunk and I was sitting there at Christmas trying to fix a camera, and I said, here, let me show you. And he grabbed the back. Here, let me show you. Here, let me show you. Here, let me show you. Margaret, she comes in, she says, here, let me show both of you, and fixed it with a pen. Why is it that an alcoholic can't take directions from anybody? Any of you wives, I try to tell your husbands where to turn on the road, don't do that. Why is it an alcoholic always thinks that he is entitled to continuous and extra excitement? And if things get a little bit slow, He'll go look for the biggest pile he can find, the one that's going to stink the most, and he'll start stirring. You watch him. Why is an alcoholic always thinks the other fellow hasn't got the least idea of what he's talking about? Why is it that most alcoholics hate Christmas and get that queasy feeling every time they get a gift or a compliment? Why an alcoholic always says, leave me alone, just leave me alone. But my God just can't stand to be lonely. Why is it an alcoholic is never, 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 never in God's world satisfied? There's absolutely no way. Why is an alcoholic keeps on making the same old mistake time after 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 time? Why does an alcoholic always hates drunks, but always manages to get drunk himself? Why is an alcoholic must always have everything his way, right down to the smallest, most infinitesimal detail? Why is an alcoholic hates to stand in line or wait for anything? Why is an alcoholic will never admit anything? Why is it that an alcoholic just sits around waiting for something bad to happen? Man, I know it's going to be bad. When's it going to be? I know it's coming. It's going to be bad, too. When? Well, an alcoholic always fine. You ever see him? How you doing, Bill? Fine, just fine. How are you, Joe? Fine, just fine. He's dying and he's just fine. You know, I hate to go to one of these drunks' funerals where they got the casket open. I'm afraid to walk by there looking at. I'm afraid he's going to sit up and say, I'm fine. Just get that fair. And why is it that no matter what you say to an alcoholic, no matter what you do to an alcoholic, it is inevitable that he is going to drink again unless a miracle occurs in his life? I took your inventory is what I did. There wasn't any need to take mine. I wasn't really an alcoholic. Now I've been a borderline alcoholic or a textbook alcoholic or a technical alcoholic or a slightly alcoholic or a little bit alcoholic or just about alcoholic or almost alcoholic or merely alcoholic or on the verge of being an alcoholic, or if I kept on drinking I was going to be an alcoholic, but I wasn't really an alcoholic, not really. And if you're not really, really an alcoholic, then you're not really an alcoholic, not really. Even if I was a better one than you were. I was different. When the police stopped me, they didn't put me in jail. They'd take me home and put me to bed. I'd get up about 3 o'clock in the morning, went over to La Marque jail, and they had an old drunk dentist there. He came to AA there and said, Judge, we got that old drunk dentist here tonight. What do you want to do with him? Cut him loose? I said, no, I'll leave him there. He's a bad drunk. And I'd go out to my car and I'd get a pint from under my seat and I'd take a drink. But you can see the difference, can't you? He was in jail. I was out. He paid the fine, and I collected it. I was different. Some of the people, and they started noticing my attitude, and they started giving me things to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't have anything to do. I wasn't drinking. What difference does it make what you do in Alcoholics Anonymous if you're not drinking? And before I knew it, I was going to all these AA dances, and I didn't even dance when I was drunk. And I was going to hospitals and visiting members of the group, and I never went to hospitals to visit anybody unless it was to sneak a pint to a buddy under the doctor's nose. And I was going to funerals of people who died in Alcoholics Anonymous. I never went to funerals. If a guy's dead, he's dead. He don't know whether you're at his funeral or not. But the thing they did that really tore me up, and I'm really not the world's best at it today, they used to take me, and we'd go around and we would visit with the varied families and members of Alcoholics Anonymous at their home. And we just sit there and chit-chat. God, it used to drive me up the wall. They must have thought I was a weatherman or something. Every time I'd come in, they say, "You think it's going to rain?" And they'd say stuff like, "Little Billy started kindergarten today," and I think to myself, "The hell he did." And then they'd get intellectual, and they'd say, "How much was your electric bill this month? Would you like to see my children's pictures, and their children, their grandchildren, their children's children, their grandchildren?" "Oh, hell yeah, let me see them all," I was really with it. We have a son. It's Margaret's boy. Every time I ran for office, his picture was on the front page of the local paper in handcuffs. Judge's son picked up in local drug raid. God, I resented that boy. Penitentiary twice, nut farms, psychiatrists, psychologists, halfway houses, three-quarter, over and over and over and over and over. And finally, we got a letter from the county psychiatrist, and he said that this boy's brain had been so damaged by the use of drugs that he would never function again as a normal human being. And I want to pay a great tribute to Al-Anon tonight, not only because I would have been glad to see this boy go. But Margaret, you know how mothers are. But after she had this training in Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, and after we got this letter from the psychiatrist, with her consent, we were able to put this boy out on the street. And 2 years later, he sobered up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he has over 4 years sobriety now. He started a NA group in Texas City, and it's larger than the 518 group now. And he started to work at a plant he's one of many applicants, and he's working now at one of the plants as an operator. He makes more money than I do, and I still resent But when I had my birthday in August, he came over and put the star on my card. So we're chugging along pretty good. I was still looking for this answer in AA, and I used to be at the 24-hour club in Houston a lot. And I went up there one night, and I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I sat up in the middle of the meeting, and I said, look, there it is, the answer to Alcoholics Anonymous. I found it at last. And see, you pull me down by the seat of the pants. He said, "Sit down, you crazy thing, you're disrupting the meeting." And I said, "Look, there it is, I found it." You know what it was? It was this sign that says, "Thanks. And I got to looking at that thing, and I got to studying, and I got to meditating on it, and I got to thinking about it some more. And I swear I didn't know whether I was supposed to have a little think, and then a great big think, and another little think. Or whether I was supposed to have a big think in the middle and two outside little thinks, and I got thinking about that thing, and I could not think what the hell it was I was thinking about. That sign almost got me drunk. I've been coming to AA about 4 months when I picked up a chip, and the night that I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, the millionaire asked me to be his sponsor. I started right at the top in AA. I had 5 minutes sobriety, and I was sponsoring somebody with 4 months in AA. How about that? And I proceeded to tell Billy everything I knew. It did not take very long. And after 4 months, he went home, he took a 12-gauge shotgun, and he blew the top of his head off. And they called me, and they told me what had happened, and you know what I said? I said, how can this guy do this to me after all I've done for him? What are people going to think of me now? I couldn't save him. And that's my old friends' resentment and fear, and they happen every time that I try to play God in my life. And I was at the meeting that night, and I went to the funeral. I was the honorary pallbearer. I didn't know what an honorary pallbearer was. Never been a pallbearer. And I was walking along behind this casket, and I guess everybody thought I was an honorary pallbearer, but I thought that I was a liar and a pretender and a cheat, and I didn't feel too good. But I went to the AA meeting that night, and I felt something. And I had not felt anything in a long, long time. And I could see that these people were concerned that Billy's death was going to get me drunk. And I felt grateful to them. I think the first feeling of gratitude that I ever had in my life that I can recall. And as a result of this, I think that I committed myself to Alcoholics Anonymous. And while I committed myself to Alcoholics Anonymous, I did not commit myself to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. They told me I was going to have to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, but I found that I could not turn my will and my life over to the care of God by turning my will and my life over to the care of God. I tell you what happened to me. I was a judge and a lawyer who smart-alecked his way into Alcoholics Anonymous. I came to observe you and to see if perhaps you could benefit from my higher education. And I would sentence drunk to Alcoholics Anonymous from my courtroom, and then I would go down to the meetings at 518 and I would sponsor them. And I would gather all these people up in my Buick, and I would take them for meetings all over South Texas. People knew me everywhere. I would walk into a meeting, I would have pigeons on the right, I would have pigeons on the left. My coffee was always served to me hot. And I loved it. And I did this every night, and I made many, many, many meetings. And I just loved this kind of thing. Everybody knew who I was. And I got away with this stuff for 5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. 5 long years. But I didn't drink. The diversion apparently was enough to keep me from drinking because I did not drink. I loved the attention. I loved the excitement that it got for me. But at the end of this time, something happened. I got angry at somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't even know what it was. I'd never had a resentment before. And I started developing all these fears, and I had never been afraid of anything in my life. Nothing. I had alcohol. Didn't need resentments. I'd had the alcohol. But all of a sudden, here I was in AA, and I won't answer the telephone. Certified mail terrifies me. I'm taking papers to the courthouse, staying over there all day with them, afraid to file them, afraid there's something wrong with them. Coming back, taking the same papers back to the courthouse the next day, and doing the same thing all over again. Absolutely terrified out of my mind. After 5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, you can blow yourself up on your own smoke in AA. Pretty easy to do. And you can get pretty high. But smoke has a way of dissipating. And down you come. And I came down hard after 5 years. And I was in worse shape than the day that I showed up at the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've never taken one step in Alcoholics Anonymous. Every step I ever took, I just had to. And as a result of this, I took an inventory. I analyzed the resentments that I found in this inventory. And I found that what it was, I had this terrible fear that I was an unlovable person, that I was unacceptable to you. And I took this fear and I buried it pretty deep. And It took me a long, long time to get around to it in Alcoholics Anonymous. I always wanted to be with the in-group. I always wanted to accept them on my terms. You know what the in-group is. That's the people with the toothpaste smiles. You know, the in-group is the group that's in. And I always wanted to be in the in-group. And they wouldn't accept me the way I wanted to be accepted. So I would continue to go lower on the social scale trying to find someone who would accept me the way I wanted to be accepted. And as a result, I ended up on the Skid Row of Texas City, the Skyrocket Lounge, drinking in my blue pinstripe suit and my rep tie. And you know what? They wouldn't accept me either. And I said, well, what it is, the reason they won't accept me, I'm better than they are. I tried all my life to satisfy my fears on my terms. And it did not work. It did not work. And trying to, since I felt that I had the approval of no one, I felt that I had to have the approval of everyone in order to be a happy person. And I thought I had to have the approval of every man, woman, child, rock, plant, and ant. Or I simply could not be a happy person. They talked about the security. Yes, I like the money and I like the cars and I like the homes, but this was not really the basis of my fear. Even more terrifying to me was, what would people think of me if I did not have these things? That's what scared me. I used sex in the same way. I thought that you always went after sex just for sex. But that wasn't true. You see, all I had to do was go home. But you see, if I could talk some lady into that kind of situation, then I could infer from that I was at least as good as her husband or her boyfriend was, and maybe even better. So you see, I had to draw inferences of worth from my manipulation of other people. And you know what? It made me a very miserable person. I was very miserable. And the only way that I could handle my miserableness was with alcohol. And when I got to AA, I tried to handle it with diversion. And it didn't work. And I had to take this fourth step. And there's been a lot of talk about it here at this conference, and I'm glad that there is. I'll give you just an example from mine. I went to my sponsor, and I had written down here on page 65, as it says, the first name I had on there says, I am resentful at my father, because he told me since I was a very young lad that I was dumb, that I had no common sense, and that I would never amount to anything. Turned out 20 years later the old man was right. But anyway, and this affects my self-esteem, my standing, my need for approval. And so I took this to my sponsor and I said, I don't understand what's going on here. And he says, well, why do you think that your father did this? And I said, well, I guess he was a sick man. And he said, yeah. He says, that's right, of course. He says, but what do you think his motive was in trying to tell you these things? How do you think, what do you think the reason was that he did this? And I said, I don't know. And he says, if what you tell me in the other parts of your inventory is true, he's trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do, gain people's approval. And he did this by belittling you in the hopes that you would do something and amount to something, and that this would increase his own worth in his own eyes. So you can see that this is very sick. I said, well, okay, but I said, over here on page 67 it says, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. And I said, now there you are. How in the world could I possibly be at any blame in this kind of situation? He's the one that everybody knows that's a sick thing to do to any child. How could I be at fault? And he says, Ted, where your blame is, he says, you continue to believe all that stuff he told you. Just because somebody says something doesn't make it true, does it? And he says, Ted, you have the choice in Alcoholics Anonymous to believe what you want to believe. And there's no need to carry that around with you anymore. And I went and made amends to my father, and I don't carry it around anymore. It really works. It really works. And I went on with other things, and I found out many things about myself, but for me, it always came down to the bottom line. I tried to satisfy my fears that I was an unlovable person on my terms, and my terms were that I had to have everyone's approval. And that's not true today. I appreciate your approval, but I really don't have to have it in order to be a happy person. And I found enough acceptance in the fifth step to self-acceptance in the fifth step to go ahead with the rest of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I became aware of these character defects, and as I slowly became aware of some of these things, I became aware of the price that I was going to have to pay in order to have them removed. And that price always involved doing something that I didn't want to do. But you know, I told people in AA, I said, I don't want to. And they said, I don't want to. And I said, I can't do this. And he said, when you say I can't, all that means is I don't want to, and or I'm not going to. That's all. And then, you see, I could ask God to remove these character defects. And I was not willing to make all my amends. But I really believe that willingness is enough. If I'm really willing to make an amend, I think it's enough. Because if I'm really willing to make the amend, there's no one on the face of this earth who could walk into this room tonight and cause me any feeling of guilt, shame, embarrassment, or uncomfortableness. You know why? Because that would be the perfect opportunity to make that amend. I saw a statute one time. It must have been Atlas or somebody. He stand up there and he had the whole world on his shoulders, just like this. Powerful man, muscle just shone. He had this great world he was holding up there. And I kept looking back on this. See, he hadn't slipped some. Kind of reminded me of me. You know, good-looking fellow. And I walked into AA same way, you know, and I had this world on my shoulders. And I said, they said, do you have any problems? And I said, no, not me. I said, do you have any literature? I've got a very wealthy, influential businessman who needs some help. You have some literature? Just put it right there in one of those pockets. And I turned around and I walked out of AA. And I come back the same way, and I still had this world up there. He said, do you have any problems? I said, no, not me. Not me. Look at me. Don't I look good? And I got into AA and I started doing some of these things. You know, I wasn't drinking. What difference did it make? And I started doing some of these things that they told me to do, things that I was quite sure was not going to work. And I put one of these hands down in order to do some of these crazy things they were making me do. And this thing really got to be a load. Man, it got to be heavy. And finally I just threw it down and I said, here, God, you take this thing. I was just playing like all the time it was mine. I had to give up and I had to let go. Thank you a lot.